I knew one person when I moved to Barcelona, and it was definitely a looking back when I tell people this story, they're like, that was kind of crazy of you to do that.
Hey, expats and travelers, it's Josh with Expats Everywhere. And in today's interview, I talked to Brian, who compares life in the US to life in Europe. And more specifically, he talks about what is so magical about Barcelona and why he chose to move there. We've put chapters for you guys if you want to skip around, but we hope that you enjoy the whole interview. Well, Brian, before we can jump too far into what your life in Barcelona is like, we need to take a look at what did life look like before you moved to Barcelona?
So basically, before I moved to Barcelona, typical story, I was working like this, corporate job. I finished school with an engineering degree, and then I went straight into this like corporate construction job. Before I started the job, I went to Barcelona for vacation. And my plan was to quit that job after 1 year and then move to Barcelona. But the pay was good, the perks were good. I ended up staying for 3 years at that job that I hated. After the 3 years, I told my boss that I don't want to work there anymore, and I bought a one-way ticket to Barcelona.
Dang, okay. So why did you feel like
Yeah.
you needed to make this move?
Okay, first of all, I hated the job. My dad asked me a question one time. He said, I was complaining to him one time about it, and he told me, he was like, "Do you see yourself in this 5 to 10 years from now?" And I was like, he future paced me, and I
Hmm.
was like, "No, I don't want to be doing this for the rest of my life." And so that's when I knew that I had to make the move to Barcelona. And it was also like I was born in Europe in a different country in Hungary, and I always identified more with the European culture in general, like more concentrated cities where you could just walk downstairs and grab groceries, kind of like New York and San Francisco have, but it's the prices there are like 5 times more expensive.
Going kind of digging in on that, have you seen any other cities in the US where you feel like it's possible, or is it only New York and San Francisco for you?
The people have told me Boston is really walkable.
Yeah.
Boston and Portland. I've heard a lot about Boston and Portland, which are two places that I haven't been to that I've heard good things about. So yeah, to jump a little bit deeper into it, I highly recommend. There's a book called Walkable City,
Yeah.
and I happened to read this book right before I left America to Europe, and it was like this book lit off so many light bulbs in my head of things that I already knew. When you're reading a book and you're like, "Oh my god, I was thinking this before," but then they present facts behind it. And it just talked about how Europe was basically built before the creation of the automobile,
Right.
and America was built after the automobile. So that's why the roads are wider and there's so much more suburban sprawl and everything
Hmm.
like that. And then I realized, I was like, wow, that's why I identify so much more with Europe than I do with America.
Okay, well, tell us a little bit about your upbringing then in Budapest, since you do have this European background, because it might help bridge the gap between us not realizing that you're American but have this European feel.
I moved to America when I was 4 years old, so pretty much born and raised there. But I was coming back to Hungary every summer. And then we would do like little side trips to other European cities. And that's where I just noticed that I really enjoy being in a place where I could walk around the entire city or use a metro or a bus that comes every 5 minutes, not every 30 minutes,
Yeah, yeah.
like they say they have buses in America, but I mean, yeah, it's just completely the whole cosmopolitan and just walkability and riding your bicycle everywhere. It was just something I noticed that wasn't as common in America as it is here in Europe. And so that definitely triggered a lot of it.
Okay, and are your parents Hungarian or are they American?
Yeah, so my mom was full 100% Hungarian, born and raised here. My father, he is 100% Hungarian, but he was born in America. There was a big revolution in 1956 in Hungary, and a lot of people left Hungary during that time and started a new life in America. So my dad was one of the kids of those people.
All right, fascinating. Okay, well,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
once you knew that you wanted to move, what were some of the steps that you needed to take to make it a reality?
Told you a little bit earlier, like I went on that trip to Barcelona after I graduated college. It was a 2 month backpacking trip all over Europe. And my first stop was Barcelona. And I was like, oh, okay, wow, I could see myself living in this city. Then when I decided that I was going to make it a reality, I moved back to Budapest first because that's where I was comfortable. And within that few-week visit to Barcelona, I found somebody hooked me up with an apartment and they said, hey, I got a place for you to move into. And I happened to meet a girl that I started dating for 6 months after I moved there. So it was like the perfect transition to move there. So those are kind of like, but as far as like steps that I took, saving up money.
Yeah. How much money do
Yeah,
you
just
think you need
saving
to
up
save
money.
up?
So I had enough to basically, I knew what I would need for living costs to live in a city like Barcelona or Budapest, which are significantly, the cost of living is significantly less than a large American city. And so I had enough money that I knew would last me for a year if I wasn't going to be employed. Somewhere in that
Oh,
fifteen to $20,000 range,
okay.
which I knew that I could live comfortably in either of these two cities on 15 to 20K. I had that much saved up just because I moved. I literally bought a one way ticket. And I didn't have any plan, didn't have a job lined up or anything.
Okay. All right. Because I mean, for startup cost wise, you had quite a big cushion or parachute of money. Whereas I think most people might go with a couple thousand just to get through the first couple of months. But then again, you didn't have a job at the time, right?
Right. I basically, that's why I stayed at that other job for 3 years because I was like, oh man, this is great. I'm getting paid well. It's gonna make my life easier when I do make the jump to Barcelona or, back to Europe. And so that's why I kind of like held off on leaving after my first year.
Yeah. Well, and visa wise, how was that? Did you need a specific visa to move to Spain, having your Hungarian citizenship?
Yeah, so great question. I guess as far as when you talk about steps, that definitely leads into that because so I've had a lot of people reach out to me, like friends from America since I moved here, and they asked me how did you do it and
Yeah.
things like that. And basically, being that I was born in Hungary, I do have the Hungarian passport and the American passport. Basically, any passport that is part of the EU countries, you can use your passport from that country and move to another EU country. I just had to sign up for what's called the NIA. It's a national extranjero, it's basically a card that shows you're eligible to live there in Spain. So once I moved there, I did have to go through that process, which was tedious. Like I had to hire a third party company. Um, I don't know if you're aware of this, but like if you try and do it yourself, it's like impossible to get an appointment. And so you have to basically pay somebody to get you an appointment and then it all gets taken care of.
Yeah, years ago when my wife and I moved to Spain, someone introduced us to a hilarious video about Spanish bureaucracy, where you show up and you don't have something signed, so they send you away and you have to get a new appointment. Then you don't have something with a stamp on it and they send you away and you have to make a new appointment. So no, we get it for sure. So
Yeah.
the NIE, I believe that's Número de Identificación de Extranjeros.
Extranjera.
Extranjeros.
Exacto.
Yeah, I'm saying it in Portuguese
Exacto.
pronunciation, or a blend of Portuguese and Spanish. Okay, so the big hurdle for you was then when you moved there it was getting that NIE, that kind of tax ID number or foreign registration number, right?
Yeah, that was definitely one of the biggest hurdles. And then I'm sure we're going to talk about this at some point in the conversation, but just learning the language and
Hmm.
figuring out what the hell I'm doing here.
Yeah.
Like I didn't have a plan. I moved there with this dream of like, oh, it's going to be so great to live there. And I remember my first few months, I would talk to my parents on the phone and they'd be like, oh, what are you doing today? And I'd always be like, reaching for some sort of answer to give them.
Yeah.
And so the first few months was definitely like, what am I doing here? What is going to be the next step? And it was a little bit put me out of my comfort zone.
Well, let's actually talk about that because I think that when you're moving somewhere and you don't have a specific job lined up, there's this weird kind of settling period that occurs because you have plenty of time, but then you also don't really know what to do with your time because you've landed in a new place. So, how did you find settling in Barcelona?
Yeah. So first thing was first, I went to a language school. That was I was like, okay, at least I'll learn the language. So I found a language school on the internet, started going twice a week, then I bumped it up to 3 times a week. And pretty much I became fluent in Spanish within like a 4 to 6 month range.
Give him
So
a
the
shout
first few
out. What's
months
the
was
name?
BCN Sunlight.
There we go. Okay. We'll put
Yeah,
the
yeah,
link in the
yeah, yeah.
description
BCN
section below
Sunlight.
if we can find it.
Awesome. Yeah. So basically, I through BCN Sunlight and through those, Spanish school, I started to build like that was my first stepping stone into building a group of friends and finding a community. Like people that also are there trying to learn this language. And then I got really fortunate in the fact that I do some photography stuff on the side as like a hobby. So basically, that's one of the things that I was doing. I was learning Spanish and just taking photos of the city and things like that. One of my photos got picked up by this co-working space and they asked if they could use it for content. And then I went in to meet with the social media manager and I worked out this contract with them where I provided them photos and they gave me free, basically they gave me access to the co-working space. That was like one of the defining moments of me living in Barcelona, joining this community of a lot of people at the co-working space tend to be expats or entrepreneurs, business owners. Both of my past two roommates have been from the co-working space, you know?
Ah, okay, that's great. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
between language studying and then also co-working space, you found friends almost immediately.
Exactly. Yeah, like I think it's such a good way to, when you're in a new city, go to, I went to meetups, like I went to like meetup.com and tried to find things
Mhm.
on there as
Yeah,
well. So like anything like fitness related. So if you can find like group fitness classes, anything like co-working related, they always usually have like events at the co-working spaces too. And then yeah, language school. I think those are three great places for people to start if they don't have any friends in a new city.
okay, nice. Let's dig in on language then, because I'm guessing that there is a certain demographic or a certain segment of our audience right now that doesn't know that in Barcelona there are two versions of Spanish spoken. There is Castilian Spanish and then there's Catalan Spanish. What's the difference? How big is the difference in Barcelona? And do you need to know both?
So yeah, it's funny. My dad always told me to, and a couple of people always said, oh, when I said I was moving to Barcelona to learn Spanish, I immediately got the. This is before I moved there. I immediately got the, oh, but they speak Catalan there, and I'm like, yeah, I know, but everyone speaks Spanish. It's both. Everyone speaks both the language. There's I don't think there's anybody in Catalonia that only speaks Catalan, maybe in the countryside or something. But I
Mhm.
mean, if you're in any major city, you speak both languages. I would say that the older generation, they definitely, you hear it sometimes in the stores and stuff and the people who grew up there. But I mean, you can totally get by with just having regular Spanish, Castilian Spanish.
Mhm.
And so I don't think it's necessary. I had this dream to learn Catalan one day, and I thought I was going to eventually since I picked up Spanish so quickly. But it turns out that it's just for me, I would rather invest my time learning a language like French or Italian
Sure.
rather than learning something that's only spoken in a certain region by 7 million people.
Sure. That's fair enough.
Yeah.
Learn Portuguese. Come join me over here.
Exactly. No, so they basically just for your audience and for your listeners, they say, just so they have context, they say that Catalan is like a mixture of Spanish, French, and Portuguese.
Okay.
Yeah,
Now,
yeah.
can you give us some examples of things that you've noticed? I'm putting you on the spot
And
here.
okay, so merci in Catalan, merci is it's the same as in French. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah,
Not
yeah, yeah.
not gracias.
No, 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 no. So there's some words that you'll hear that are like Italian or French or Portuguese, and it's from Catalan,
Ah, very
or
interesting.
not from Catalan, but yeah, same.
Okay. So you would recommend if someone is moving there that it's okay for them to know Spanish or Castilian
Yeah,
Spanish.
exactly. Like there's a lot of people come to Barcelona and Spain from like South America, and they do fine.
Okay.
So I mean, you just have to, yeah, if you know Spanish, you'll be fine.
Okay.
Make that your first hurdle. Don't try to learn Catalan.
Fair enough. Well, tell us a bit about the cultural implications of Catalonia. What is it like in terms of their rivalry, Barcelona versus Madrid? I'm not talking football, but I'm talking about just that tension between the two. Do you feel it? Is it a problem?
I think that topic is a little bit more blown out of proportion
Okay.
than it actually is in reality. Like I've spoken to people from Madrid and both Barcelona, and like it all comes down to personal preference. I mean, do you want like a more metropolitan type business city vibe? Then you would go for Madrid. But if you enjoy the ocean and the Mediterranean, good weather, most of the year round, then Barcelona would be your choice. I mean, there definitely are some people that are prideful, but I don't think it's as bad as others may make it seem.
Okay.
When it comes to football, it's different. But as far as just like culture, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's a big history between the two, but it's good to know that on a daily basis that you're not being confronted with this, or it's not heavy or weighty. That's really nice.
There definitely, I would say, as a caveat, though, there are just because Catalans are very proud of their heritage and their culture,
Mhm.
and there has been that they have tried to pull away from Spain,
Yes.
and tried to secede, and so that's why. I mean, there are protests there and stuff like that. Whenever I feel like there's always elections happening and protests happening, and so
Yeah.
it's definitely a common thing to see there.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's talk a bit more about life in Barcelona. What is it like? What is it like making friends? What's kind of the lifestyle? Can you give us an indication of what it's been in your experience?
The good thing about Barcelona is you have this like city. You have a cosmopolitan city with great metro, bus, and train system that connects you everywhere. So you can go if on a weekend you want to go and do like something nature, you can do that. You can go for a great hike. In the wintertime, you can go snowboarding 2 hours away. So that's why I always joke for people watching this in America, or you grew up there as well, so you might understand this. I always say like Barcelona is almost like a mix between New York City and Miami and California, in the sense that you have a beach, but you also have this like metropolitan city that's well connected, like New York. And then you also have nature, like in California, you can go snowboarding or hiking just outside the city.
Nice. Have you traveled much of Spain? I'm assuming you have.
Not as much as I would have liked to have. I still haven't been anywhere. I still haven't been anywhere in the north of Spain. I've pretty much done some of the south of Spain. I've been down to like Andalusia, to Sevilla, Granada, and a couple other little small towns down there. But I haven't been to and I've been to Madrid for a layover. That's it. So I haven't gotten to explore that much as I would have wanted to. After being there for 3 years, you would think it'd be more.
Yeah, okay. Well, maybe you can do this, maybe you can't, but can you give us some sort of comparison between how people in Barcelona are compared to other parts of the country?
Mm. I mean, I know that each individual region of Spain has has its own like cultural backgrounds, but I think the people in general as a whole, like the Spanish culture is somewhat similar. I mean, the
Hmm.
people are usually warm, family oriented. They enjoy a good party. They love tapas. And yeah, so I mean, I haven't noticed like a striking difference between the different personalities. You hear the difference in the accents maybe as well, but as far as like the people in general, I don't notice much of a difference in different parts of Spain.
Okay, that's fair enough. I mean, we've just heard
Yeah.
some people that we've spoken with, and then even in our own experience, Madrileños and people from Barcelona specifically are a little less friendly than people from other parts of the country. Although, like you said, people in Spain are altogether quite warm and social. And making the comparison between Portugal and Spain, which now we do because we have the experience in both. People in Portugal are that much nicer and warmer than less social, I will say. I think less social than people in Spain.
You mentioned the two cities, and people maybe aren't as I think it just comes down to cities in general. There's so much going on, and maybe people are just busy
Yeah.
and not so open to somebody who's out in the countryside and doesn't have as much going on in their life.
Yeah. Yeah. I just wanted to see if you've noticed that as well. Cool. Did you find any one person or group or anything particularly helpful as you kind of made your adaptation or during your adaptation period?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to kind of like what we talked about before, as far like the co-working space again made such a big impact on me. Not only did I meet a good majority of my friends who connected me to other friends through that, but I mean, also like I said, when I first moved there, I was fortunate to be dating a local Spanish girl who's from a small town called, or not small town, but a city called Girona, a little bit outside of
Uh-huh.
Barcelona, and she really like showed me around the city, and it was great to have somebody there when I first moved there, just not to be like trying to figure things out on my own.
Nice. That's great.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, well, can you tell us what was the most difficult thing that you confronted as you were settling into life there?
I think the most difficult thing was just, and this is a little bit more on the personal side, like me trying to figure out, okay, what is my next step? Like, I think some of your listeners might identify with this as well, is that like I didn't know if I should look for a job in Spain
Hmm.
or if I should continue to find like look for something in America where I could work remote in Spain. That was like the dream of mine, but I wasn't sure how to go about that. I mean, now because of COVID and everything, like I think remote work and things like that are becoming much more common. And so I think it might be much easier for people to make the transition now and still keep some sort of job in America or wherever they're coming from and be able to move there, as opposed to like when I moved there, it still wasn't super, super common. So I was like fighting this. Basically, my first job, and just so you know, I don't know if I ever told you this, but like my first job in Spain was I kept in contact with somebody that I met on my first trip there. I went on a tour in Valencia actually,
Hmm.
and I kept in contact with her. Name is Sonia. The company's called Tour Me Out, and I kept in touch with her. And when she saw that I moved to Barcelona, she reached out to me and she was like, "Hey, we're actually looking for tour guides in Spain. Do you want to do this?" And so that led to my first like paying job in Barcelona. Was showing people. I'd been living there for about 6 months, so I was speaking Spanish already. I was somewhat familiar with the city, and I basically started doing free walking tours. I went from a high-paying engineering job, to doing free walking tours in Barcelona. Can you imagine what my parents thought?
But how did you feel?
I loved it. I was free. I was showing people. I was walking around every single day, just meeting new people, showing people the city that I fell in love with, and sharing information. Like basically, when I got hired by that first tour company, I ended up getting picked up by another one as well. That was like more food and wine tours. So within a 1 year period, I learned so much about Spain and Barcelona in general, just from the information that these tour companies gave me. So it was awesome, and I really enjoyed it. I had my time back. I had my freedom back, and I got out of a job that I didn't like, and I got into doing something that I did enjoy. Granted, the pay was significantly lower, but at least I was enjoying life again, you know?
Oh, that's brilliant. I'm gonna have to round
Yeah.
Kalie and Valencia up, and we're all gonna make a trip to Barcelona and take a tour with you.
Yeah, for sure. No, I'd definitely love to show you guys around.
Nice. Well, let's talk a little bit about the finances, I guess, because you talked about working and making less money. So, what do you think
Hmm.
a good salary is, and what do you think people need to be making, especially if they're used to kind of American comforts? How much do they need to be making?
Yeah. So if you're honestly the average person, if you talk to somebody working in Spain at
Mhm.
like any, like basically friends and people that I talk to, you're making anywhere between 2 to 3K a month. If you're making somewhere in that price range, 2 to 3K a month, you can rent an apartment, you can get food for yourself. Like that's a decent salary. There's some people that I know make $1,500 a month and they survive off that. So I mean,
Yeah.
it's much less in comparison to what you would make in America, but it's also enough to get by on.
Yeah. Yeah, when we were living there over a decade ago, I was making around 1800, and I had roommates
Yeah.
and everything, and it was great traveling all over Europe. Yeah, it was great. That was in
And
Madrid.
do you find around the similar like price range, right around like 2 to 3K, you could be living comfortably, right?
Back then, this was before, well, definitely 2 to 3K. You could be living comfortably.
Yeah.
Back then was around the time of the global financial crisis. And even before that hit, people were talking about how if you were making 1,000 euros, just 1,000 euros, you were a millionaire, milionario. And, it was a bit tongue in cheek to say that you were making $1,000, but like a millionaire. Um, but no, like on 1,000 even, you could live. You could live. You weren't going into debt. Yeah, you were living a more humble lifestyle. But yeah, 2,000, 3,000, you can have your own place. You can eat whatever you like in
Yeah.
whatever restaurants you want. Wine's cheap. Tapas are sometimes free, but also cheap. Yeah,
It really comes down, you just brought up the point where it really does come down to that. If you're living with roommates, you can cut your costs in half. You
oh
know what
yeah,
I mean? If you're looking for your own place, then it's going to be a little bit more expensive. But if you're willing to, and now there's so many apps out there. Like I know a big one in Barcelona is called Body, and then you have all these other apps where you can find roommates on there.
nice. Well, so
Yeah.
what things have you learned about yourself during this move and this adaptation process?
So putting yourself in uncomfortable situations is a great way to grow, and definitely just yeah. I mean, going into the unknown, this has been such a fun journey. Like I feel so fulfilled knowing that I basically went into this with the idea that okay, if I go there, I have that 1 year runway that we talked about, and if I go into this, if I hate it, if it doesn't work out, if I don't find a job, I can always just go to Plan B and go back to America and find that job again and go back to that life that I was living. But if I didn't take that risk, it would have haunted me forever. So I guess, just going out there, and if you want something, trying it and going for it. And when you fulfill that dream, if it doesn't work out, you can go to Plan B. But if it does work out, it's so good. It's the best feeling ever.
Nice. Well, what does your new life in Barcelona look like? How has it become the new norm for you?
So, I mean, now I have like this fantastic community of friends. Literally, anytime I want to go do something, I have somebody on speed dial that I can call and go do something. So, since the pandemic, I got out of the tourism sector and I actually started working again for an American company. It's like a coaching and consulting company. It's called Scaling with Systems. Shout out to them. And so we actually help business owners and entrepreneurs grow their businesses. And so now I'm at the point where I'm able to, I have this time freedom where I can kind of make my own schedule. And it's kind of nice because since I'm working on American hours, I have my mornings typically free to do whatever I want to do. Like I pretty much every single morning, my routine is I go to the beach and I watch the sunrise and I do some stretching and then I go jump in the water. Like every single morning, that's how I start my day. And it's the perfect start to the day.
Look at you, Wim Hof over here.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah, every morning. It's just people in Spain don't tend to wake up till later either.
that's
So if you
right.
wake up in those
You're
like,
alone.
if you're out there from 7 to 9, the beach is empty, it's beautiful, the sun's coming up.
What does that feel like? That must be incredible.
I have a lot of mornings where I'm sitting out there on the beach just watching the sunrise, and I'm just so grateful that I pulled the trigger and made this dream a reality and moved to like I knew one person when I moved to Barcelona, and it was definitely a big looking back when I tell people this story, they're like, that was kind of crazy of you to do that.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's definitely nice when I have those moments to myself and I'm just sitting out there thinking back about how grateful I am for the past few years.
That's amazing. Well, you know what's interesting to me as well is how things have kind of come full circle where we were talking earlier about the job situation. And 3 years ago, remote work wasn't as common. So you did take a job that was maybe on the more local economy, and then now you've come to this remote work, which I think is probably what a lot of people that are listening to this are going to be able to do or want to do.
Yeah, and I don't know if you're aware of this. This is literally something that I just came across about a week or two ago because of this whole change in what's happening in the world and people working remote. There's Spain wants to attract entrepreneurs and business owners and
Yeah.
people living this digital nomad lifestyle. So have you heard about this? They're planning to do that 12-month digital nomad visa.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of countries right now, especially in Europe, they're scrambling and they're all going to be competing against each other because
Yeah.
remote is becoming the new norm. And instead of people having to be digital nomads, now they can just be remote workers. Digital nomads, more or less, I don't know if we share the same definition, but it would be someone who would work for a month to 3 months in a place, not be on a visa. But now we're talking about
hmm
having a year visa so that you can actually feel like you're really living in a place and you're not having to move around. Is that right?
You hit the nail on the head with that. It's basically, yeah. I forgot the whole like, or I didn't even think about it that the whole digital nomad thing is more of like short term and doing 1 to 3 months, which I think is great as well. There's all these new websites and things popping up. I don't know if you've heard of these either that are like specifically for medium term stay.
Hmm.
So it's not like an Airbnb, but it's not like yeah. I think we actually talked about this previously.
Yeah.
It's not like a hotel, but it's not like a year lease.
Yep. Yeah, it's definitely really popular here in Portugal. My wife and I actually we signed a 6 month contract instead of a 12.
Nice.
Yeah, it's quite common. You might pay a little more, anywhere
Yeah.
between 50 and maybe up to 200 more for the same apartment, just because you're not giving as much security, right, to the owner. They
Yeah.
might have more wait time between new tenants. But anyways, don't want to derail the conversation. Um,
Yeah.
so, what's some advice you can give about this whole remote work thing? How did you find your job, and what advice can you give about that process itself? Because I think some people might not have a remote job yet, and they really want one. What can you tell them?
If you know anybody else doing it, or if you know anybody in your network, or if I'm sure you can look up online like opportunities for remote jobs and things like that. Or if you're, with your current employer, start speaking to them about possibly taking, these like sabbaticals, but not so much sabbatical, continuing to work during the time either and testing it out and seeing if it works. I've heard of people doing that as well and having success with
I think you just gave some really sound advice, man. You did.
it.
You did because I think networks are huge. networks are
Yeah.
really important. So you tap into the people that you already know and that already know you and trust you. And then there are groups that you can get into digital nomad groups or remote worker groups, and certainly jobs can pop up there. Cool, man. What are some key differences that you notice between the U.S. and Barcelona? Or maybe I
So
should say U.S. and
definitely
Spain.
key differences. So I would say one of the biggest things for me, just going back to what I was talking about earlier, as far as like the cities, and they're much more concentrated, and you don't have to have a car. Like I do plan to eventually buy a car again, but you really don't need one. Like most people my age don't have a car there unless you grew up there. So I think just that having a bike and walking around everywhere and using the metro and things like that, that's one of the big differences for me. And then I guess just as far as quality of life goes, I'm sure you know this, but like they take much more vacation time in Spain and in Europe in general than the typical American job vacation time you get, the standard, 14 days. As opposed to in Spain, like the month of August is basically like a 1 month long vacation for everyone, And
Yeah.
so, and then plus on top of that, you have so many holidays and it's just, yeah, I think the quality of life as far as free time, like time you get off from your, quote unquote job, I think there's more of that in Spain. I think people enjoy a better quality of life. Another big thing for me actually that just came to mind is I think a lot of people move to Spain, like a lot of expats. It's a pretty popular destination for people to move to, just the weather and everything like that, the cost of living. And so for me, there's this energy in Barcelona, especially, that I feel where you have, like, I'm not the only person to ever go to Barcelona on vacation and be like, oh my God, I love this place.
Yeah.
There's hundreds or thousands of people like me that have done the same thing. And so you have this like energy that people truly want to be there.
What's changed the most for you when it comes to life and living in Spain?
So I would say just in general, like the quality of life that I'm living, I feel much happier. I feel much more fulfilled because I set my mind to this thing that I was going to do and I did it.
Mm.
And so I think anybody going out there, you always hear this saying, like you would rather know you tried and failed rather than never having tried at all. And, I think I have this like immense gratitude and this like, and, self-confidence after it too. Like it makes you, when you put yourself through these difficult things that most people won't do, it grows you inside and it gives you this confidence to do more and to try other new things as well, So I think that's one of the biggest things that I set my mind to something and I did it.
I love hearing that. Absolutely love hearing that.
Yeah.
Well, at Expats Everywhere, we believe that living abroad transforms lives. How has living abroad transformed your life?
So first of all, if I wouldn't have learned Spanish, there's so many people that I wouldn't be friends with out there. So just expanding, like we were talking about earlier, expanding my network. It's all, when it comes down to, there was that research done with, older people, in their 90s, and they say that a lot of times what comes up the most important thing in life was their relationships,
Mm.
And I find that when, like, not to speak bad about anybody that stays in the same hometown their whole life, but it's just like you're very limiting your opportunities. If you were born in one place and you grew up in that place and you went to elementary school, middle school, and high school there, and then maybe you left for college, but then you moved back to your hometown, it's just like, I urge anybody out there to get out there and move somewhere new, because I mean it just opens up your network so much to meeting new people. Then learning Spanish, there's plenty of people that I've been able to meet and become friends with that if I didn't learn Spanish I wouldn't be able to be friends with them. And so just learning a new language also opens up so many doors. I think it increases your neuroplasticity in general and like makes you open to learning other new things as well. And yeah, I mean, it's just, the whole thing has been a life-changing experience. I couldn't imagine, living in the same place my whole entire life. So I definitely urge anyone listening to go out there. If you've been thinking about it, definitely go do it. Take the leap and take the risk, because it's totally worth it.
Brian, that's awesome. We appreciate you meeting with Expats Everywhere. All the best to you, man. Thanks.
No worries, man. It was trouble. See you guys later.